What if the secret to a self-sufficient garden had nothing to do with the latest fertilizer or the most expensive irrigation system, and everything to do with something buried underground that most people have completely forgotten about? For centuries, farmers in Germany and Eastern Europe practiced something called hugelkultur, hill culture, and it produced some of the most fertile, low-maintenance growing beds ever documented. But there's a deeper layer to this technique that almost nobody talks about, because buried inside a properly built hugelkultur bed is not just decomposing wood and rich soil. There is an electrical current, a living battery. And today, I'm going to show you how to build a garden that waters itself, fertilizes itself, heats itself, and generates its own electricity, using nothing but scrap wood, 2 pieces of metal, and dirt. Stick around, because toward the end, I'm going to explain something genuinely extraordinary about how that electricity might loop back and help the plants themselves grow faster and stronger. The science on this is recent, and it is remarkable. But first, the foundation, because you have to understand what hugelkultur actually is before the electricity part makes any sense. The idea is almost insultingly simple. Instead of hauling away dead wood, you bury it, you pile up logs and branches, layer compost and soil on top, and build a mounded garden bed right over the top of all of it. That is it. No complicated construction, no expensive inputs, just wood, soil, and time. What happens next is where it gets interesting. As that buried wood begins to rot, it does something that no bag of fertilizer can replicate. It transforms the entire bed into a self-regulating system that only gets better as the years go by. The wood becomes a sponge first. The same fibrous structure that once pulled water through a living tree becomes a massive underground reservoir, soaking up rainwater and releasing it slowly to plant roots during dry spells. Established hugelkultur beds are genuinely drought-resistant in a way that conventional raised beds are not. Many gardeners report needing little to no irrigation after the first year. The bed is handling it on its own, then there's the heat. All that biological activity from billions of decomposing microorganisms generates warmth. The core of a hugelkultur mound runs several degrees warmer than the surrounding soil. Some gardeners measure a consistent 5 to 7 degree Fahrenheit difference. It acts like an underground furnace, giving plants a head start in spring and keeping them productive later into fall, without any external energy input at all. The system is literally heating itself from the inside. And that is before we get to the electricity. Here is what most gardeners have never been told about the ground beneath a decomposing log. In 1841, a Scottish clockmaker named Alexander Bain buried 2 metal plates in the damp soil behind his workshop, 1 copper, 1 zinc, connected them with a wire above ground, and measured approximately 1 volt of steady electrical current. No acid bath, no chemical reaction, just 2 dissimilar metals in moist soil. He used that current to power his newly invented electric clocks and called it the Earth Battery. Early telegraph lines were even powered by variations of this principle. What Bain had discovered is basic electrochemistry. Moist mineral-rich soil acts as a natural electrolyte, the same role sulfuric acid plays in a car battery. The zinc, being more chemically reactive, sheds electrons that flow through the wire to the copper. A current flows continuously as long as the soil stays damp. Simple, durable, free. At the same time, observers in that era began noticing something odd around the fields where copper and zinc plates were buried. The crops nearby seemed to grow thicker and taller than the surrounding fields. Nobody studied it seriously. The industrial fertilizer revolution arrived and buried those observations, along with the earth batteries themselves. But those observations were pointing at something real, and we will come back to that in a moment. Here's how to actually build one of these. You need old logs and large branches for the bottom layer, smaller twigs and sticks to fill the gaps above them, a nitrogen-rich green layer like grass clippings, kitchen scraps, or fresh compost, and topsoil to cap the whole thing. For the electrical component, you need a sheet of copper, a sheet of galvanized steel. Galvanized means it is coated in zinc, which is what you want, and enough copper wire to run from each plate up through the bed and out the top. Start by digging a shallow trench about a foot deep, or simply build directly on level ground. Lay your largest logs at the bottom. These are the long-term fuel source and the core of your water-retaining sponge. Before adding the next layer, place your 2 metal plates. 1 copper, 1 zinc or galvanized steel, so on opposite sides of the bed, deep in among the logs, roughly 3 to 4 feet apart. Attach a length of copper wire to each plate with enough slack that the wires will reach up through the finished mound and stick out at the top. This is the only critical rule about the metal. The 2 plates must not touch each other anywhere inside the bed. If they connect directly, you short-circuit the whole system. Now, add your smaller branches and twigs on top of the logs, filling the gaps. Layer the nitrogen-rich material on top of that, grass clippings, kitchen scraps, whatever you have, and soak it thoroughly with water. This layer jump-starts the microbial activity. Cap the entire mound with about 6 inches of topsoil and rake it smooth. The only sign of what is buried inside are 2 wires emerging from the soil at opposite ends of the bed. What is happening underground, once those microbes get to work, is a combination of 2 scientific principles operating simultaneously. The first is the galvanic reaction, the same one Bain discovered. Dissimilar metals in a moist electrolyte generate current, straightforward electrochemistry that has been understood for nearly 2 centuries. The second is more recent and more fascinating. The intense decomposition at the core of a hugelkultur bed creates ideal conditions for what researchers now call a microbial fuel cell. Modern science has confirmed that specific bacteria, Geobacter and Shewanella are the 2 most studied, release electrons as a direct byproduct of breaking down organic matter. These are literally electricity-generating organisms. Geobacter actually grows conductive protein filaments called nanowires to transfer those electrons through soil. Shewanella can reduce metal compounds, effectively using the metals as part of its own metabolic process. By placing metal plates inside a decomposing organic core, you are not just building a simple earth battery. You are potentially tapping into a living microbial generator that becomes more active as the bed matures. Once the system is established and the microbes are active, a multimeter connected to your 2 wires will show a fluctuating but consistent reading of around half a volt to 1 volt. To be clear, this will not power your house. The amperage is very low, but it is real, measurable, and durable. It can run a small, low-voltage LED light or a soil moisture sensor continuously. And as long as there is organic matter for the microbes to decompose, that output could persist for years or even decades. Now, here's the part that I find most compelling. That electricity is not just a byproduct you can harvest for a light or a sensor. It may also be doing something directly beneficial to the plants growing above it. The study of how electrical current affects plant growth is called electroculture, and it has a long and complicated history. A lot of the claims made about it over the years have been exaggerated or impossible to replicate. But the serious modern research is producing results that are hard to dismiss. A 2024 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that electrically stimulating barley seedlings for 5 days boosted their growth by up to 50%. Other controlled research has shown that weak electrical fields in the root zone can accelerate seed germination, stimulate root development, and improve how efficiently plants absorb nutrients. The science is still emerging, and not every experiment produces consistent results, but what it suggests is a genuinely extraordinary loop. The wood decomposes and generates electricity. That electricity stimulates the root zone of the plants growing above. Those plants eventually die and return organic matter to the system. The bed feeds itself, powers itself, and potentially amplifies its own productivity in a cycle that compounds over time. A garden that does not just grow food, but generates the conditions for its own improvement year after year, from nothing but scrap wood and the natural chemistry of soil. What you are building when you put one of these together is not just a raised bed. It is a shift in how you think about what soil actually is, not dead dirt that needs to be fed inputs from outside. A living system with its own energy, its own water management, its own heat, and its own electrical output. All of it running on biology and physics that have been understood for nearly 2 centuries, and largely ignored because there was no way to sell it in a bag. The logs in a good hugelkultur bed can remain productive for 20 years or more. The microbial fuel cell at its core could theoretically outlast that. The plants growing above it get the benefit of all of it simultaneously. This is not a complicated build. It is scrap wood, 2 pieces of metal, some compost, and topsoil. The rest is the system doing what living systems do when you give them the right conditions and leave them alone. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.